because you're going to see some pretty nice airplanes. Now, I know this next airplane is an F5, but the paint job was so pretty I had to kind of put it in there. When we got the CF-18, some of these paint jobs are just phenomenal on these airplanes. When we got the CF-18, it was relatively new technology for the time. And our newest airplane, I think we got in 1987 or 1988. So, sorry about that. The thing is that our newest airplane is like 20 to 30 years old, or 30, almost 30 years old. So, they do wear out. So, with all the controversy on the F-35 that's supposed to replace them, what we have to look at is how good of an airplane was this for Canada. If you've been following some of my channel's videos, like on things like the Avro Aero and stuff like that, the thing about it is that the CF-18 had to do kind of everything. It had to be a trainer, a fighter, a bomber, a reconnaissance, everything, interceptor. It had to do it all, and it kind of fits that role. Basically, we took to have air superiority and air sovereignty with NORAD. We basically bought them in 1982. Okay. And they were basically used in the Gulf War. They were used in Kosovo. They were used in the Libya no-fly zone, of course, in Afghanistan. They were used all over the place. So pilot-wise, like our pilots, they do a fair amount of training. We don't have a lot of pilots now. We have about 120 to 140 of these airplanes at about a unit cost of about $35 million a piece in 1977. That's what they cost. So it's a multi-rolled fighter for us. It kind of had to go through a couple of upgrades to get to where it is now. Basically, when we wanted to replace the CF-104 Starfighter, which Canada never really used it as a dogfighter. We used it more as a strike roll aircraft, kind of like go intercept some bombers and then go zoom in with the boom maker in the belly and blow up whatever. We didn't have nukes here in Canada, but we had them through NORAD, where we would actually deliver nuclear payloads, stuff like that with the Starfighter. And then, of course, the CF-101 Voodoo and the CF-116, which is basically a freedom fighter. So basically the CF-116 was basically the Northrop F5, Tiger Shark and freedom fighter. But the difference is ours were made by Canada Air, and we pretty much did that, just named it our own. We were supposed to have a $2.4 billion purchase of 130 to 150 aircrafts. Back in the day, to replace the Voodoo, the Starfighter, and the CF-116 freedom fighter. So the competition was basically the F-14, the F-15, the F-16, the Tornado, the Dassault Mirage F-1, and the F-16. And of course, out of the competition, also the FAA-18 Hornet was also, we were looking at a denavalized version of it, which I think we should have went with, just because, yeah, the Navy stuff on it is kind of nice, that you got folding wings and all that stuff. But that's more maintenance, right? So you could either build a bigger air hangar, or you could or you could do more maintenance. So it's kind of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Personally, I think it would be better to have the airplane be a little bit lighter and a little bit, a little more. So, but that's just, that's what we got. We ended up buying the Navy version, even though we don't have an aircraft carrier. Sometimes we do joint exercises with the Americans and land on their aircraft carriers, but very, very little, because we don't have one. The other thing too is that when the FA-18 was designed, it actually came in about 400 to 600 pounds under its specified weight, so it's still a fairly light fighter for what it was. But in the day, I mean, it wasn't the fastest airplane in the world. It was designed to be a budget airplane, to replace the Tomcat, to replace the F-4 Phantom, to replace a whole host of airplanes. What you call it, the Crusader, the Crusader, there was a whole bunch of airplanes that the CF-18 or the FA-18 that was going to replace. Now, we took it because it did a little bit better up high than the F-16, but not quite as good down low as the F-16, but it did better down low than the F-15 and not quite as good as up high as the F-18. So in other words, it was the best of both worlds. So you had good low altitude, ground attack capabilities with good high altitude performance. Plus, it had a twin engine, which gave it that a huge advantage if you were going to, be overseas. Now, we nearly did get the F-14, kind of through a backdoor deal during the Iranian Revolution, because the Americans basically said, okay, well, they're no longer going to sell F-14s to Iran, and instead we could have gotten those F-14s on a really, on a budget base. But the F-14, again, is just too expensive to keep it running. Would it have been a better airplane to go with than the F-18? I don't think so. I think the F-18 still has a lot of advantages over the F-14, such as in maneuverability, and it's cheaper to run. The F-14 is a lot more, is a better interceptor for sure. As a low-level ground attack airplane, yeah, it works very well in that role too. But again, it's just such a more complicated machine, and it's pretty much outclassed by everything now, airframe-wise. There's very few, I think maybe at the most 130 F-14s that were still kind of in operational. They're pretty much all phased out because again, they're worn out, right? So. The Americans, they mothball them for a little bit, they pull them out for a little bit, they do upgrade programs to them, then they pull them out, and then they mothball them again, and that type of thing. Where the CF-18 or the FA-18 in the States, it's just been kind of an airplane that's just been kind of, it's a good workhorse airplane. It's not too expensive to run in comparison to other things. It's one of the best all-around fighter jets of its, in history. It's a really good airplane for what it is. It's a jack of all trades airplane. That's what makes it so good. The F-15 is still a superior high altitude, fighter, dogfighter and stuff like that. But if you want to go down low, the F-18 has the advantage. Now, the F-16 is a decent maneuverability. The F-16 is argued next to the F-22 and possibly the F-35 is probably the most nimble and agile airplane that the Americans have. But it's limited with one engine, so although it has good performance, it's limited in the fact that it doesn't have as long a range, even though you have air-to-air refueling. You got to refuel more, and you don't have the weapons payload you have with the the twin engine airplanes. So there's fines and vices to it, and it doesn't do as well up high as say like the F-15 or the F-18. So again, it's always a trade-off back and forth. And again, when you're looking for the all-arounder, it's the F-18. So the CF-18 is virtually identical to the American one. However, there are some slight differences. For example, we have a big spotlight mounted to the left side of the window. On the left side of the fuselage, and this is basically whenever we're chasing Russian bombers like the Tu-95 Bears. Every now and then we go up and we pretty much intercept them and say, get the hell out of our airspace, that type of thing. It's usually always a friendly encounter, but it's still, the Russians test their boundaries as well as testing our boundaries, right? So in bad weather, we decided to put a big spotlight on the side of the airplane, which can be removed whenever we don't need it, but it's something that the American version doesn't have. The next thing that Canada did is, and you'll notice this on every CF-18, and this is usually the biggest way to tell the difference between the Canadian ones and the American ones, is on the bottom there's a fake cockpit canopy painted on the bottom, and what it is it's designed to kind of confuse the enemy for a split second in a dogfight, just enough to get, it gives you just that little bit of advantage. Now, I've seen enough of these things flying that when these things are coming down, coming down in an attack mode at 400, 500 miles an hour, slightly coming out of the sun, and they're flipping back and forth, you don't know if they're coming or going. And, they can fool you. So it's just a little clever, little sneaky little thing that us beady-eyed little mayonnaise-eating Canadians do. It was kind of neat that they did that. The next thing that was neat is that the early models were advanced for their time. This was the super fighter of its time. But it was always designed as a, kind of a budget Air Force airplane. It wasn't the spare no expense. But however, it's an upgradable airplane. Now, the earlier models, they weren't quite as fast. They weren't quite as fast climbing and stuff like that. But they have a roll rate of about 420 degrees a second, and the rudder, is or the elevator's 30 degrees a second, or 30 degrees max deflection. The turn radius, probably about 20 seconds. 18 to 20 seconds. It really depends on the pilot how well he can control the airplane at high power and low speed. I've seen these things fly in high angles of attack of about 45 degrees at as slow as about 120 miles an hour, which is pretty impressive to watch. So they do have a wing that can bleed off speed really fast, which allows the airplane to do what's known as the square loop. The square loop doesn't look as impressive as, say, some of the Russian counterparts when they do the Cobra maneuver or whatever. But the square loop is kind of the counter to the Cobra maneuver. It's not as obvious until you see how it's done. Almost every Russian airplane, when it goes into the Cobra maneuver, it'll go real high alpha to almost like 110 degrees, where the nose kind of almost goes behind it goes greater than 90 degrees, and then all of a sudden the nose starts coming down, it comes down, it comes down, then all of a sudden, they're in a 10 or 20 degree nose down attitude. Well, if the CF-18 does that, what happens is it'll pull up into what's known as a square loop, where the wing bleeds off a lot of energy, but it shoots the airplane straight up, and then they roll, and they do another half split S, and the next thing you know, this thing is going straight and level again. So it would actually it would bleed off all its speed, but yet it has enough wing area to keep it flying, so that it doesn't end up in a nose down and have to dive for speed. So it's an advantage that a lot of people don't realize, that's the counter to the Cobra, and it works very well. It might not be quite as maneuverable as the F-35. The Su-35 in some ways, because it doesn't have as much power, but it could still, it's a better roll, and it's a snappy airplane. It's a really good airplane. The other thing is that speed wise and stuff like that, it climbs reasonable and stuff like that. It has a reasonable speed, but the earlier models were around 8 to 1200 miles an hour, was as fast as they could go. They had about a 12,000 to 16,000 thrust power engine. Now the CF-18, because we had to modify it, there was a few problems we had early on. Was that the airplane was actually a little, pilots would get a little overwhelmed with the computer systems, because there's about basically 25 onboard computers on the airplane. It is technically a fly-by-wire airplane, but the problem you ran into was that you had to do all this punching things all into the computer and stuff like that, and a few pilots actually crashed because of it, because they would get they get disoriented, right? So obviously upgrade programs, more powerful radar, communications, stuff like that, and then of course we had kind of like the budget version to begin with, and it wasn't capable of dropping precision bombs as well, because we were still kind of using the older missiles and stuff like that. So to bring it into the future, so to speak, we ended up putting in a helmet-mounted look-down, shoot-down system. We also upgraded the radar and all the linkages, communication linkages to basically keep up with NATO and stuff like that, so that we could identify a friend from foe, all that stuff. And we also upgraded it to have more powerful and quicker processing radars, so that it was able to fire more advanced weapons, and that's what we have today. Now in the engine department, our CF-18s have a slightly smaller engine nacelles in comparison to the American, because our engines are actually, they've been kind of tweaked by us. Canada's kind of known for doing that, buying American airplanes, using them for what they are, and then rather than going out buying a whole bunch of new airplanes, we just do upgrade programs. And the engines, we've put quite a bit of boost of power into them, going up to about 22,000, now probably around between 24 and 26,000 pound thrust class engines, giving the airplane much higher speed of probably anywhere from Mach 2.2 to Mach 2.4 at top speed, and the cruise is, relatively. In full combat payload, the CF-18, the early ones climbed about 2 miles a minute, or about 10,000 plus feet per minute. Now it can climb probably about 35,000 feet a minute. A little more. Range about 400 to 600 mile range on internal fuel, with drop tanks about 2,000. So, but in ferry mode, you're all cleaned up. You don't have any bombs or missiles on you. You might have 2 sidewinders or whatever. That's it. So you got the AIM-9s, the missile systems that you got. You got the AIM-9s, the AIM-120s, the Maverick AG. Was the AGM? The AGM-65 Maverick. We got all kinds of GBUs, all that stuff. What else we got here? Okay. Get some weapons. The big problem on the why we want to replace the airplane is mainly because it's, they're getting worn out. But there's another problem too, is that in order to navigate in the Arctic, we have to attach extra pods and sentries to it to be able to navigate in the Arctic. So, like, basically, the airplane is it doesn't have things built into it. You have to add it on the external, which makes the airplane more detectable by radar. So to get stealthy, you need an airplane that can do that. Now that's another problem that the F-35 has, is that we still have to attach external components in order to be able to navigate through the Arctic with it. So, it's kind of, here you got a stealth airplane, now you got to hang something off of it. It kind of defeats the purpose of stealth, right? So that's a problem when you buy airplanes that are designed for other nations, is you got to kind of live with what, it might not suit the RCAF. Okay, overall length is about 56 feet. You have two versions of it. Basically, we have 42 tandem seat versions, and we have the rest are pretty much 80 single seat versions. And you're looking at 56 feet long, or 17.7 meters, 40-foot wingspan with sidewinders, looking at 12.31 meters, height 15.4 feet or 4.66 meters, wing area 400 square feet, airfoil, we'll bother with the airfoil, but the empty weight is 23,000 pounds or 10,455 kilograms, loaded 37,150 pounds or 16,850 kilograms. Max takeoff weight is 51,550 pounds or 23,400 kilograms. Power plants. Now this is where I kind of disagree with it. These are the earlier ones. The General Electric F404 GE 400 turbofans were 16,000 pounds of thrust each, or 71.2 kN. I forget what kN. KN's metric anyway, but the thing is that they've been upgraded here in Canada, so some of this data is, that's one thing with the Winnipega, is they'll just go with the original data that was put out years ago, and the original one had a top speed of Mach 1.8. Now ours are, like I say, Mach 2.2 to Mach 2.4. The ones that are upgraded at 36,000 feet, that's what they got, or 1,814 kilometers per hour. So about 1,200 miles per hour. Combat radius was 330 miles, or 537 kilometers. So that's in bombs and everything like that. Ferry range, again, about 2,070 miles. Just drop tanks, nothing else on it. Surface ceiling is about 50,000 feet on the original. We're about 56,000 feet on ours. Rate of climb to get is 245 seconds to get to 50,000 feet. So you get the idea. That's with a full combat weight. Power thrust to weight on the original was 0.89. Okay, so armament, you got 5 pylons, two on the wings, 1 under the fuselage, and you can also have the laser guided. What's it called here? I'll give you the. It's basically for ground targets and stuff like that. It's called. Oh, where is it? Oh, there we go. The Lockheed Martin Sniper XR on the CF-18. Basically, what it is it's a pod that you'll see out on the side of the under the fuselage, and what it does is basically it can, rather than having to fly the airplane, bob the nose down, bob it up. What this thing does is it looks straight down for you, and you can lock on the targets and blow them up and stuff like that. Okay, so you can deploys. The LAU-116 located on each side of the fuselage, that's the sniper thing, and deploys AM-7 AMRAAM missiles, and LAU-7s are located on the wingtips, deploys AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles carrying up to 13,700 pounds of ordnance, missiles, bombs, fuel, everything, or 6,215 missiles, bombs, fuel, rockets, all that. We have one 20mm M61A1 Vulcan Gatling gun with 578 rounds at a rate of 4,000 to 6,000 rounds per minute. That's a lot of firepower. I mean, a 20mm cannon will take out just about any current military aircraft in the air, any aircraft on this planet anyway. Maybe against an A-10 or a Frogfoot you might have to get a little bit closer, but it'll still, rip them up pretty good. The air-to-air AIM-9s, the AIM-120s, and the AIM-7 Sparrows. Air-to-ground is the AGM-65 Maverick and the CRV-7 Rockets. Bombs, the Paywave Mark 82, 83, 84, the GPU-10, that's the big one, 12, 16, and 24 laser-guided bombs. The radar is the AN APG-73 radar, BAE Systems AN Apex 111 IFF, and the Rockwell Collins ANRC 210 RT 1556 ARC VHF UHF radio. General Dynamics Advanced Information Systems, AN AYK-14 XAN Mission Computer, and Smith Aerospace AN AYQ-9 storage system. So that's just all the things that runs the airplane, the avionics in it. So we have again quite few squadrons, but we don't have the Air Force going like we used to. What we have now is basically, we keep it kind of low. We don't necessarily, fly all our airplanes all at the same time, because we got to keep the the airframes kind of low, the flight hours low, that type of thing, so that they don't wear out, because we may have to push these things to 2020. At that point, like, I mean, some of them have fallen, rudders have fallen off in flight, some, all kinds of problems, because they're like any vehicle, they wear out, right? And these things get pushed pretty darn hard. Talking about positive, 9Gs to -6 or something like that, at the extremes, and probably +6 to -4 on the average, so that's pretty hard on the airframe. Next to that, if you see a Canadian pilot fly at an air show, they are pretty impressive to watch. The Canadian pilots are actually pretty darn good. In Libya, we didn't drop as many bombs as other nations, but we did drop quite a few. Same with Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, the way the CF-18 pilots work is if they can't identify, like, they'll be up at 20,000 feet, and if they can't identify the targets, they don't drop bombs. So we had the commander at the time, when the media kept saying, how many did they drop, how what targets did they hit, and he says the media was actually kind of surprised that we were coming back with bombs still on the airplane, and they're like, well, if we can't clearly identify the target, we're not going to drop bombs just for the sake of dropping bombs, right? From that point on, the commander said, no, you will not, the press will not be talking to the pilots, because we don't want to put that kind of stress on the pilots where they feel that they have to drop bombs, because they're professionals, right? And one of the things about it is that they try to make it as dropping a bomb on a target. They usually are working with the ground crews and saying, okay, here's what you want to drop it east of the building, to the left of the little creek, to the whatever, and then, okay, well, I can't lock onto it. Okay, well, we'll laze it for you from the ground. And if there's a whole bunch of guys that work into it's much more than just the pilot and the missiles and the bombs. It's a whole group of people that's put that bomb where into the pickle barrel where it needs to be, right? So that's one of the things about the CF-18 is they can drop some pretty darn precise weapons, but like anything in war, bombs go astray. The bombs, they have to maintain the bombs the same way they maintain the aircraft, like things wear out, even just from sitting there, right? So anyway, I don't know what much more I can say about these airplanes. I mean, they're quite legendary. They are kind of hard to replace. I think what Canada should do is, because we did build a lot of them here under contract with Bombardier and stuff like that, so it means we still have the tooling and the jigging and stuff like that. Plus, we've had them around long enough that we have enough jigs and stuff like that we could probably make most of our own parts and everything. So what I'd say is just like, okay, rather than reinvent the wheel until we can decide on a new fighter, maybe sell off some of the older ones and just kind of build maybe 20 or 30 newer ones just to kind of tie us over, rather than flying airplanes that have really high mileage on them, you know what I mean? So that's kind of one way we could go about it. The other thing too is that with Canada, like our military budget is not like anywhere, it's not like the United States or like that. So we're very limited. So we really have to, push our things to the, we got to really wear out these pair of jeans. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, what the taxpayer, how much they pay on this. I mean, these things don't all fly at the same time. We typically keep about, you know, 6 or 7 of them, or 6 to 8 of them flying on a regular basis. Okay, and then in combat we'll keep up to say about 24 to 26 of them in combat roles. And because again, it's not like World War II where you can fly thousands of hours on an airplane without really hardly maintaining it. You know what I mean? Like some of the older airplanes didn't require as much maintenance. A CF-18, for every 1 hour flown, you're looking at roughly about 12 hours of routine maintenance, which was considerably, a starfighter was about 15 hours of maintenance for every 1 hour flown. So when you think about it like that, the CF-18 was a good deal in that sense. But again, if you were to redesign the same airplane today, and kind of simplify it a bit, like again, get rid of the Navy stuff, add any equipment that you need to add internally, and then just simplify it, you could probably build another generation of these things to last for another 50 years. Who knows? Depending on how well you build them, right? Plus, you can build them with lighter, better materials. Even though these are still kind of cutting edge, state of the art airplanes, they're still 1970s technology, right? So, but anyway, I guess I'm babbling now, so I'll leave it at that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. So rate, subscribe, share, comment, and like. Okay, hi, and welcome. Get your drool bucket out because you're going to see some pretty nice airplanes. Now, I know this next airplane is an F5, but the paint job was so pretty I had to kind of put it in there. When we got the CF-18, some of these paint jobs are just phenomenal on these airplanes. When we got the CF-18, it was relatively new technology for the time. And our newest airplane, I think we got in 1987 or 1988. So, sorry about that. The thing is that our newest airplane is like 20 to 30 years old, or 30, almost 30 years old. So they do wear out. So with all the controversy on the F-35 that's supposed to replace them, what we have to look at is how good of an airplane was this for Canada. If you've been following some of my channel's videos, like on things like the Avro Aero and stuff like that, the thing about it is that the CF-18 had to do kind of everything. It had to be a trainer, a fighter, a bomber, a reconnaissance, everything, interceptor. It had to do it all, and it kind of fits that role. Basically, we took to have air superiority and air sovereignty with NORAD. We basically bought them in 1982. Okay. And they were basically used in the Gulf War. They were used in Kosovo. They were used in the Libya no-fly zone, of course, in Afghanistan. They were used all over the place. So pilot-wise, like our pilots, they do a fair amount of training. We don't have a lot of pilots. Now, we have about 120 to 140 of these airplanes at about a unit cost of about $35 million a piece in 1977. That's what they cost. So it's a multi-rolled fighter for us. It kind of had to go through a couple of upgrades to get to where it is now. Basically, when we wanted to replace the CF-104 Starfighter, which Canada never really used it as a dogfighter, we used it more as a strike roll aircraft, kind of like go intercept some bombers and then go zoom in with the boom maker in the belly and blow up whatever. We didn't have nukes here in Canada, but we had them through NORAD, where we would actually deliver nuclear payloads and stuff like that with the Starfighter. And then, of course, the CF-101 Voodoo and the CF-116, which is basically a freedom fighter. So basically the CF-116 was basically these Northrop F5, Tiger Shark and freedom fighter. But the difference is ours were made by Canada Air, and we pretty much did that, just named it our own. We were supposed to have a $2.4 billion purchase of 130 to 150 aircrafts. Back in the day, to replace the Voodoo, the Starfighter, and the CF-116 freedom fighter. So the competition was basically the F-14, the F-15, the F-16, the Tornado, the Dassault Mirage F-1, and the F-16. And of course, out of the competition, also the FAA-18 Hornet was also, we were looking at a denavalized version of it, which I think we should have went with, just because, yeah, the Navy stuff on it is kind of nice, that you got folding wings and all that stuff. but that's more maintenance, right? So you can either build a bigger air hangar, or you could or you could do more maintenance. So it's kind of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Personally, I think it would be better to have the airplane be a little bit lighter and a little bit, a little more. So, but that's just, that's what we got. We ended up buying the Navy version, even though we don't